Good afternoon. On Tuesday, June 19th, President Trump will deliver remarks at the Nfib 75th anniversary lunch. Nfib is America's leading small business association, promoting and protecting the right of Americans to own, operate, and grow their businesses. The President will highlight the strong American economy and tout the benefits we are seeing from tax reform and deregulation, including that small business optimism has hit its highest level in more than 30 years. As you know, National Economic Council Director and Assistant to the President Larry Kudlow was discharged from the hospital and is recovering at home. The President has spoken with Larry, and he's in good spirits. We look forward to having him back here at the White House soon. Tonight at Nationals Park, Republicans and Democrats in Congress will put aside their political differences to play America's game. After last year's horrible shooting at the GOP practice, where Capitol Police acted heroically in the line of fire to save lives, we're excited to see those who were injured return to the field, including Majority Whip Steve Scalise. Those injured have fought hard for this moment. We will proudly be cheering them on. I've heard the Republican team looks pretty good in practice and that they're headed for a victory. Lastly, on June 14th, we celebrate Flag Day, commemorating the adoption of our American flag, which we all proudly stand for, the founding of our brave U.S. Army, and last but certainly not least, we would like to wish the President a very, very happy birthday. And if I do say so, I don't think he looks a day over 35. And with that, I'll take your questions. A little sucking up's probably never bad. Kevin.
Sir, thank you. If you would please comment on the recently released IG report, your impressions of what you've read so far, and have you had an opportunity to discuss with the President the New York Attorney General's idea of suing the Trump Foundation to have it shut down in the state of New York?
The President was briefed on the IG report earlier today, and it reaffirmed the President's suspicions about Comey's conduct and the political bias among some of the members of the FBI. Director Wray, as you know, will be holding a press conference later this afternoon, and we'd encourage you to tune in for specific questions. As to your other question, the President has tweeted about this specifically earlier today. The foundation raised $18 million while giving $19 million to charity while virtually having zero expenses. The previous New York AG, who was forced to retire in disgrace, made its stated mission to use this matter to advance its own political gain, and the current acting New York AG has stated that battling the White House is the most important job she's ever done. That sounds outrageously biased and certainly problematic and very concerning. Cecilia.
In the State of the Union, the President had some really harsh words for North Korea. He said no regime has oppressed its own citizens more brutally than North Korea. Why is he now downplaying North Korea's horrific atrocities?
The President hasn't downplayed. Like you said, the President has raised North Korea's human rights record and some of the abuses of the North Korean regime in a number of occasions. He also raised them at the summit that took place earlier this week, but the focus of the summit was denuclearization and peace on the peninsula, and that was the purpose of the President's conversation, and that was the focus of what took place there.
But when he was asked human rights on Fox News, he said a lot of other people have done some really bad things. How is that not downplaying the atrocities?
Again, certainly that's a factual statement. A lot of people have done some bad things. However, the President hasn't ignored the bad things that have been done by the North Korean regime. He's directly called it out on a number of occasions, as you yourself mentioned, and he brought it up at the summit. And again, the purpose of the summit was to focus on denuclearization and looking towards that brighter future, and that was what the President was trying to do. Margaret?
Thank you, Sarah. Could you confirm that there is a trade principles meeting today, that there are Chinese tariffs coming tomorrow, and there was a report that somewhere in the...
It's a lot of questions. We'll go one at a time.
It's the same thing. Okay.
Yes, there is a trade meeting today. In terms of any announcements, I'll keep you posted when we have something to announce.
Third part of my two-part question is there has been a report that
part of a two-part question.
That 800 to 900 Chinese products would be on that tariffs list. It seems like quite a high number, even though I guess the highest number is 1,300. But even if you're not ready to roll out the whole thing, if that number is higher than it really is, could you tell us now?
Well, since I'm not making any announcements, it would be hard for me to give details of an announcement that we're not quite ready to make. Whether or not we will, we'll certainly keep you posted. But beyond that, I can't get into any details. David?
Thank you, Sarah. 2 questions, if you don't mind. The president said earlier this week that he did speak with Kim Jong-un about human rights abuses. Can you tell us exactly what areas of concern they talked about? And was it the Gulag work camps, torture, public executions, the lack of freedom of religion of the press, kidnapping, women's rights? What did they actually talk about?
Again, they covered a number of different topics, a couple that you listed. I'm not going to get into all of the details of their private conversation, but I can tell you, as the president has already publicly stated, that he did bring up human rights abuses of the North Korean regime. Jim? I'm sorry, you too.
I just say too. Rudy Giuliani spent 20 minutes today talking with one of our reporters about his love life and proclaimed that, and in his words, he's not going to be a priest if he's separated from his third wife. Has this become too big of a distraction to the point where the president would consider going to get another lawyer? And then also on that, he said his soon-to-be ex Judith called the president last week. Can you tell us what they talked about?
I'm not today or tomorrow or at any point ever going to comment on Rudy Giuliani's love life. I will be glad to leave that to you and the reporter that spoke with him, and I'm not aware of a call and don't have any information on that. Jim?
Sir, can you tell us why the president saluted the North Koreans when he was over in Singapore?
It's a common courtesy when a military official from another government salutes that you return that.
Second question, completely unrelated, on these children who are being separated from their families as they come across the border. The Attorney General earlier today said that somehow there's a justification for this in the Bible. Where does it say in the Bible that it's moral to take children away from their mothers?
I'm not aware of the Attorney General's comments or what he would be referencing. I can say that it is very biblical to enforce the law. That is actually repeated a number of times throughout the Bible. However, this... hold on, Jim, if you'll let me finish. Again, I'm not going to comment on the attorney's specific comments that I haven't seen.
It's in the Bible to
That's
follow
not
the
what
law.
I said, and I know it's hard for you to understand. Even short sentences, I guess, and please don't take my words out of context, but the separation of illegal alien families is the product of the same legal loopholes that Democrats refuse to close, and these laws are the same that have been on the books for over a decade, and the president is simply enforcing them.
Policy to take children away from their parents. Can
It's
you
a
imagine
moral
the
policy
horror that
to
these children
follow
must
and
be going
enforce the
through
law.
when they come across the border?
Jim.
They're with their parents, and then suddenly they're pulled away from their parents? Why is the government doing this?
Because it's the law, and that's what the law states. And the
You
law...
guys don't have to do that. It's
You're
your
right, it doesn't
policy.
have to be the law, and the president has actually called on Democrats in Congress to fix those loopholes. The Democrats have failed to come to the table, failed to help this president close these loopholes and fix this problem. We don't want this to be a problem. The president has tried to address it a number of occasions. We've laid out a proposal, and Democrats simply refuse to do their job and fix the problem. Paula, go ahead. Sorry, Jim, I've given you enough
Two
time.
questions. First of all, there is no law that requires families to be separated at the border. This was the administration's choice to move from civil matters and immigration onto criminal, to criminally prosecute people who come across the border illegally, and therefore you have to separate families. So why did the administration find that this was necessary, and if it continues to not have much of a deterrent effect, will you continue this policy?
Again, the laws are the ones that have been on the books for over a decade, and the president is enforcing them. We would like to fix the broken system that our immigration and fix our immigration problem. However, until Democrats are willing to actually fix this problem, it's going to continue. But we would like to see it fixed. Jill.
Does it take responsibility for its policy change from civil, handling them as civil matters to criminal prosecution?
It's not a policy change to enforce the law. That's been this
Sessions
administration's
made a change.
policy since the day
No,
we got
Sessions
here.
made a decision in April that he was going to move
It's-
from handling it as a civil
it
matter
has
to
been
criminal
our
and separating
administration's
families.
policy.
Our administration said it was a deterrent. They're separating families to deter people from coming here illegally.
Our administration has had the same position since we started on day one, that we were going to enforce the law. I know it was something that wasn't high on the priority list in the previous administration, but it is on ours. We're a country of law and order, and we're enforcing the law and protecting our borders. We would like to fix these loopholes, and if Democrats want to get serious about it instead of playing political games, they're welcome to come here and sit down with the president and actually do something about it.
You're a
Jill.
parent. Don't you have any empathy?
Jill, go ahead.
Come on, Sarah. You're a parent. Don't you have any empathy for what these people are going through?
Jill.
They have less than
Brian,
you do.
guys,
Sarah, come on.
settle down.
Seriously.
I'm trying to be serious, but I'm not going to have you yell out of turn.
They're
Jill,
telling
please
us
call.
It's a law, and they have. These people have nothing. They
Hey,
come over
Brian,
here
I know
with
you want to get
nothing.
some more TV
It's
time, but that's not what this is about. If I want to recognize you, go ahead,
Sarah.
Jill.
Honestly, answer the
Good
question. It's a serious question. These people have nothing. They come to the border with nothing, and you throw children in cages. You're a parent. You're a parent of young children. Don't you have any empathy for what they go through?
Jill, go ahead.
Two questions for you. Firstly, does the president really believe that Crimea is part of Russia because everyone there speaks Russian? And the second question, the president had said that Kim Jong-un told him that North Korea is destroying a
Let me
major...
answer your first question. I'm not aware of any comment like that. I know it's been reported, but I'm not going to comment on a private conversation I wasn't a part of that I don't have information on. Second part.
So the president said that Kim Jong-un had told him that North Korea was working to destroy a major missile engine testing site. Is that the Sohae site, as it's sometimes referred to?
We'll have specific details later. We're working with the Department of Defense, and we'll make sure we get you guys that information. Trey?
Thanks, Sarah.
Sorry, Trey, go
Two
ahead.
questions on the IG report. Earlier this year, the president suggested that the DOJ Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, was, quote, an Obama guy. How does the president view Horowitz today, and does he feel that this investigation was thorough?
Again, the president thinks that this report reaffirms the suspicions that he had about Comey, and Director Wray is going to hold a press conference later today, and I would encourage you to tune in for that.
The text message exchange between...
Sorry, go ahead, Trey.
The text message exchange highlighted in the report between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. Ultimately, the FBI agent Peter Strzok said, we'll stop it, and that he was referring to candidate Trump becoming president. Did the president have any reaction to this information when you spoke with him after he was briefed today?
Certainly, again, causes a great deal of concern, and I think points out the political bias that the president's been talking about, and that has been repeatedly mentioned from this administration that we found to be a huge problem, and we're glad they're looking into it. Kristen.
Sarah, thank you. Did the president or anyone else use funds from the Trump Foundation to pay for personal, business, or campaign expenses?
I'm not aware of any of that taking place.
Would you definitively say no?
Again, I'm not aware of it, and I'd have to get more information, but I would refer you to the Trump Foundation for that specific claim. I haven't spoken to him about that specifically.
Let me just follow up with you. President Trump said several months ago he doesn't think Michael Cohen is going to flip. Is that still the case?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
President Trump tweeted several months ago that he doesn't think that Michael Cohen is going to flip. Does he still think that's the case?
I would refer you back to the president's comment. John?
Yeah, two questions, please, Sarah, and thank you. First, there have been reports on almost a daily basis and in punctilious detail about EPA head Scott Pruitt doing things that border on the unethical, and almost on a daily basis Republican members of Congress call for his resignation. What is his status within the administration, and does the president have confidence in him to remain as administrator?
Certainly, we have some areas of concern in some of these allegations, but I don't have any personnel announcements at this point.
My second question is, Congressman Mark Sanford blamed the president's tweet as the final straw in his defeat, making him the second Republican House member to go down to defeat. This is the first time in 48 years a sitting president has opposed a member of Congress of his own party. Does the president intend to speak out for primary challenges to other critics of him within the Congress, and if so, who?
I don't have any announcements on any candidates that the president may or may not endorse, and wouldn't be able to address that from this venue either. Sorry, that's right, Mara, I'll come back to you.
I appreciate it. Two questions. First, on the two immigration bills that the House is considering, Does the president have a preference for one over the other, or are both just fine with him? And then I have another one.
The president's already laid out a proposal that closes the legal loopholes and provides the resources to secure our border. If the process leads to a permanent solution as outlined by the president, then we would support it.
Has he looked at those two?
Again, we've laid out what we want to see, and if this gets to a permanent solution, then we would support it.
All right. And then another question about immigration. You blame the Democrats for not closing the loopholes. Republicans control both houses of Congress, and despite the president's repeated preference for Mitch McConnell to get rid of the legislative filibuster so they could pass something without Democratic votes, they have not done that. So don't Republicans take some responsibility for the immigration laws?
Look, if a
that they exist?
handful of Democrats wanted to solve this problem, we could quickly get it done, but they don't, and they've refused to come to the table and actually be part of a solution instead of just playing political games and attacking the president.
The president has asked Mitch McConnell numerous times to get rid of the legislative filibuster, and he hasn't. In other words, that's not a barrier.
Look, the majority of Republicans support fixing the loopholes. The president wants to work with them. We want to get something done. We've laid out a proposal to do that, and we are hopeful that Congress, particularly Democrats in Congress, will come together and actually fix the system.
So
I called on you
no
next.
responsibility for the immigration problems at the border?
Look, the president wants to fix it. I mean, we have laid out a number of different plans and proposals that would close these loopholes, and we continue to be ready and willing to work with Congress to get it done. Please.
Sure. Two questions by me. On immigration, what does the president want to see the House of Representatives do in the next week?
Again, we've laid that out. We'd like to see a permanent solution to fix the loopholes and secure the border.
And on
on DACA, I think.
Well, just on upcoming votes, is there a particular bill that he favors or a particular approach on that?
Again, he wants to see all of the different components that we laid out several months ago addressed, and if any of the legislation comes to the table that would create a permanent solution that does that, then we would support it.
Thank you. And sorry, on NAFTA. The president's threat of avoiding tariffs, does that mean that he will withdraw from NAFTA in the coming days?
I don't have any announcements on that.
Sarah, to follow up on Trey's question on whether the president believes that the Inspector General's report was thorough, several GOP lawmakers today have called for a second special counsel. Would the president support a developed inquiry into the Inspector General's report and into the further conduct of the FBI, or does this settle the matter for all time?
Certainly this creates a great deal of concern, and we're going to tune in to Director Wray's comments this afternoon. But certainly there are a lot of things in this report that not only worry those of us in the administration, but should worry a lot of Americans that people played this political bias and injected that into a department that shouldn't have any of that.
To follow up on that, does the president believe that Peter Strzok should still have a job at the FBI?
I haven't specifically asked him that question, but my guess would be no. I'll take one last question. Eamon.
There are a number of officials here at the White House who are reportedly eyeing the exits, including Mark Short, Raj Shah, and yourself. Can you give us a sense of what to expect? Are any of those officials leaving, and what's the plan to replace all those high-level people?
Well, I don't know that there's a need to replace them. As I stated last night in a tweet, I think CBS got a little ahead of their skis, particularly since they put out a story about my thinking without ever actually talking to me. Seems that it would be a little bit problematic. In terms of personnel announcements, I don't have any to make. I can tell you that I show up here every day. I love my job. I'm glad to work for the president. And each and every day I'll pray for clarity and discernment on what my future looks like. Right now I think the country's looks pretty good, and I'm glad to get to be a part of that process, and I'm going to continue to do my job. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Happy birthday to the president.
Good Thursday afternoon. Welcome to the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer, joined by our political director, Rick Klein. A happy birthday to the president, Donald Trump, and he got quite the gift today with this Justice Department Inspector General report, highly critical of the FBI, affirming, as Sarah Sanders said there, Rick, some of his own suspicions about the political bias, alleged political bias, although that's not exactly what the Inspector General found.
No, it is harsh on James Comey. There's no doubt about that. And finding insubordination in specific instances where he did not follow Justice Department protocol. And if you remember, the original reason, before President Trump spoke about it, for firing James Comey was about this. The twist on it all is that it all seems to have helped Donald Trump and not Hillary Clinton. And specifically, the Inspector General says they didn't find any evidence of political bias playing out. I suspect that's not going to be part of the official White House reaction. And boy, that text message, what a headline that is. That really is the big takeaway.
I think we have that. Let's take a look. This is between a FBI lawyer, Lisa Page, and Peter Strzok, who was one of the lead investigators in the Hillary email probe and also on the Mueller team. Take a look here. Lisa Page writes, he's not ever going to become president, referring to Donald Trump, right? And Peter Strzok there writes back, no, he's not. We will stop it. 3 big words, huge words that are going to negatively impact the FBI. It's going to do a lot of damage to the agency. We know the FBI director is set to address that shortly.
Yeah, and it's going to cast a shadow on Mueller as well. Without any response from him, we know that he fired Peter Strzok once some of the text messages, not this one in particular necessarily, came to his attention. But this is exactly what Donald Trump has been saying from the beginning. And this, as the White House says now, reaffirming his suspicions, even though there's a missing link here, even though we don't have any official action that Strzok or anyone else took to try to act on this, the idea that they went into this investigation with this mindset, feeling like they wanted to favor or disfavor a candidate, that's very, very big. And it cuts against what the FBI does, and it underscores the argument the president's been making about a witch hunt.
All right, a lot of ammunition here for the president going forward. Certainly we'll seize on that, even as those findings concluded there was no evidence that he swayed any of the actions of the FBI. I believe we have our Justice Department reporter, Mike Levine, joining us on the phone. Mike has been over at the Justice Department poring over this. There he is on camera. Great to see Mike. 500-page report, Mike. You've done some terrific reporting, breaking the early look at this. Give us your takeaway after you've poured through those pages.
You know, in these, as you said, 500 pages, a lot of this is not that surprising. The big takeaways are not surprising. We sort of expected that the IG was going to go after Comey for his big announcement in July 2016 saying that Hillary Clinton would not face charges. We sort of expected the IG to go after James Comey for sending that letter to Congress announcing the reopening of the case. But it's the little things that are actually hugely surprising about this report. The fact that the IG says that they can't rule out that political bias may have played a role in at least one agent's decision, that to me is a pretty big deal. And there's also something really ironic about this. This whole investigation, the whole report, is the result of an investigation led by James Comey into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. And we learned today from the IG that they found that James Comey himself used private email for some of his official business.
And Mike, it's hard to see how the agent at the center of all of this Peter Strzok, who has been seized on, whose texts have been seized upon by Republicans, by the president, hard to see how he keeps his job after today. Any indication of whether they're going to be taking any disciplinary action against him in light of this report?
So the IG says that he's going to be referring all of his findings to the FBI to decide what they want to do when it comes to disciplinary action. A couple of days ago, I actually emailed Peter Strzok, and he wrote me back and said that he has to decline comment. But as of right now, he's still there, showing up every day.
And Mike, is there any indication of what we're going to hear from the FBI director? I actually think Sarah Sanders' tone was a little bit muted today. I thought they'd come out a little more firing away. They're indicating they're looking forward to hearing what the FBI director, Chris Wray, says in a couple hours. How strong do we anticipate him to be in responding to an IG report that's very critical of the leadership under a previous regime?
You know, I'm not sure how much he's going to have prepared remarks. I ran into an FBI official earlier right outside of this building, and he said that he expects that the director is really just going to be coming out to take reporters' questions, and of course it's going to be to defend his agency.
All right, Mike Levine out at the Justice Department. Great work, Mike. Thank you so much for your reporting, and we know much more from you on abcnews.com and on the ABC News app, and of course coming up tonight on World News, a huge story that's going to have reverberations the rest of the week. Another one, the good news for the president perhaps in this report, but tomorrow could be a little bit more challenging. We know that there's perhaps another shoe to drop in the Mueller probe. We know that Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, will be in court tomorrow, Rick. He's been out on bail, but he's in some hot water for potential witness tampering.
Yeah, witness tampering, that he is alleged to have had communication with people that would potentially be witnesses in this probe, text messages using a particular app that apparently the Mueller team have their hands on. The Manafort's team has said there's nothing to this. They're confident that it's not going to happen. It would be pretty extraordinary to revoke bail in a case like this, but man, it does look bad. And again, we're talking about text messages, and if they end up being used in this case, we're talking about Donald Trump's former campaign campaign manager, very big deal there, being sent to prison as a result of this investigation, an offshoot of the investigation. So yeah, it would not look like a good day.
So something to keep an eye on for tomorrow, a big day for Paul Manafort back in court. Meanwhile, the talk of the big story of the past several days, the North Korean summit came up in this briefing too, Rick. You know, Sarah Sanders was pressed today on the president's comments overnight, seeming to defend and downplay Kim Jong-un's record on human rights. She said he brought it up.
No downplaying is what they're saying. But of course there was downplaying. I mean, the interview with Brett Baer that was conducted on Air Force One on the way back from the Singapore summit, really striking, because Brett and other reporters have done as well, have said, look at exactly what this guy has done. He's a killer. He murders people, concentration camps inside his own country. And President Trump's answer essentially was, a lot of people have done a lot of bad things. Sarah Sanders said it's undeniably true that a lot of people have done a lot of bad things. But you juxtapose that with what even the president has said about the brutality of the Kim regime, and of course the factual record. And you add all of that to the salute that the North Koreans ended up releasing, a salute of President Trump to a North Korean general. Yes, it was a common courtesy, simply a common courtesy to conduct that salute in the back hallways of that setting. You saw just from a couple nights ago in Singapore. Here it is. We have the video. The president saluting, an unbelievable scene. We were talking earlier, one would imagine the blowback if, say, President Obama had saluted the North Korean dictator. Very, very awkward. Speaking of blowback to President Trump's summit with the North Korean leader, there has been a lot of it on the Hill. Let's bring in our Capitol Hill producer, Ben Siegel, who's been tracking the reaction to that. Ben, the talk today, still a lot of skepticism from Republicans to this deal, even 3 days after the summit, and, Bob Corker leading the charge there.
Yes, I think there's been a lot of concern about what comes next. There's been some worry that this is a negotiation that's hasn't happened yet. There was a handshake before the actual hard work had taken place, unlike some previous administrations in the past with big world summits such as this. And I think there's a concern also not to really get crosswise with the president in terms of what he's saying about Kim Jong-un. Paul Ryan yesterday, the Speaker of the House, was asked about what Donald Trump said about the North Korean dictator, and he said we should have no illusions about the kind of person this is, the kind of regime we have in North Korea that we're dealing with. But at the same time, Ryan said the status quo wasn't working. Other presidents couldn't get to the table, couldn't get the ball moving forward. So he gave the president credit on that front. So I think everybody here is still waiting to see what happens next.
And Devin, just in the last few minutes, a statement from John McCain, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, saying it was a mistake of the president to negotiate away the joint military exercise, saying it's bad negotiating as well as bad policy. So I am struck still by how kind of quiet the blowback has been. You've got some senators, Republicans in the House and the Senate, both saying, this is not exactly the way we'd handle it, but they're giving him a whole lot of leeway. A little bit of leeway.
Bob Corker says they're all seduced by the cult of Donald Trump. But I think you're right. I do think, as you point out, though, that Pentagon decision today has huge ramifications that the allies are certainly very nervous about and worth tracking as the Congress sort of looks at options that they can hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire. Big story, of course. Ben Siegel, stand by. Thank you for that. We'll come back to you. Another big headline. A lot of headlines today popping. A lot of news. Donald Trump and the Trump Organization under some heat. Rick, bring us up to speed on this lawsuit by the New York Attorney General's office against the foundation.
The state attorney general has sued the Trump Foundation and named in this lawsuit the president as well as his children, who will serve in advisory and leadership capacities with the foundation. And basically what they're saying is that the foundation was a shell game for political activities. And a lot of this was known already in terms of the president. There's been some great reporting out there in the Washington Post and elsewhere about how few of the commitments are actually followed through on. But we talk again about Trump campaign managers. Another one in an email here, Corey Lewandowski. We remember the famous episode where President Trump was unhappy with a particular debate moderator, said he wasn't going to do another debate shortly before the Iowa caucuses. He had a big event for the veterans in Iowa. It raised a lot of money, millions of dollars. An email from Corey Lewandowski to the Trump Foundation officials saying, can we get some of that money out this week in Iowa, meaning right before the Iowa caucuses? And that, according to the New York Attorney General's office, is exactly what you can't do with a foundation. It's supposed to be aside from politics.
It's supposed to be a charity. It's supposed to be isolated. And of course, they referred this case to the FEC, also to the IRS for some tax, that $10,000 portrait Donald Trump had commissioned of himself using foundation funds for a golf course. An interesting case, of course, spearheaded by Democrats, but worth keeping an eye on. I believe we have Catherine Faulders over at the White House to bring. We don't have Catherine Faulders at the White House. Okay, we'll catch her next time. And so let's wrap up today with the other huge story dominating headlines this week, and that is this very emotionally charged issue of immigration. You saw it bubble up there in the briefing, Rick, of this policy that the administration has brought in of separating children and families, prosecuting 100% those people who come across the border illegally. Boy, it has really drawn the ire of even Republicans in Congress.
Yeah, and I wonder how long the White House can maintain this line. Sarah Sanders is on the offensive today, saying it's Democrats' fault. We're just enforcing the law. Of course, though, this is a policy. This is a piece. This is an interpretation of the law that this Justice Department under President Trump has decided to do, which is instead of using typical civil procedures for the misdemeanor offense of crossing the border illegally, it makes it a criminal matter, and that means having to separate adults from children. And that's what's going on right now on the border. Our colleague Tom Yamas got a tour of one of the facilities in a former Walmart in Brownsville,
Reaching
Texas.
Capacity. These children are
more
coming
than
across.
1,000 kids, and imagine the terror in their minds as they're taken away from their families. They have very little communication with the outside world. They get recreation time and they get fed meals, but what a scene is going on. And this is an undeniable result of a policy that the Trump administration has put in place. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has talked about this as a deterrent. People, if they don't want their kids taken away from them, don't bring them and don't be crossing the border illegally. So that is an undeniable fact. And the president still is turning this into a political argument against Democrats. I wonder how much longer it can last.
Right. I don't know how much longer she can hold up under those questions. She even seemed to get a little bit choked up today under complete offense by Brian Karem. They're hammering her on the emotional nature of this issue. Sarah Sanders is a parent. And you're even starting to see some movement from Republicans on the Hill, which I think is very telling. In one of the two bills drafted, we see some language perhaps banning the separation of families. Let's bring Ben Siegel back into this. Ben, you were up there with Speaker Paul Ryan today. He seemed to indicate now that there's sort of some momentum among conservatives to do something on this because of pressure they're getting at home.
That's right, Devin. And we actually just received a copy of the discussion draft of that bill. And I can read that to you in terms of those provisions that deal with the family separation. The proposal at this point, which is still not the final draft, what our sources are telling us is that this new bill would require equal treatment of all unaccompanied minors apprehended at the border. And it would also clarify the DOJ ruling that the administration claims they're trying to comply with this separation policy. It would clarify that ruling to make sure that that alien minors apprehended at the border must not be separated from their parent or legal guardian while in DHS custody. So they're still taking these concrete steps to address this in legislative form, moving a little further. But let's keep in mind that these bills are not signed into law. They have to pass the House. It's not clear if they can, and if they do, and if this bill does, it's not clear that the Senate will even take it up or has the votes.
I want to hit that point, Ben. I want to circle back on that point and underline it, because it's one thing to say you disagree with the policy, you call on the policy to change. To say you want a law to change it, no one realistically thinks there's going to be an immigration law signed between now and the election. Am I right on that, Ben? Is there any indication otherwise?
I think you're right, and I think this same question was brought up to Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader of the House today, and she made it clear that this is something that she thinks that the Justice Department and that Jeff Sessions can clarify right away, and she actually snapped her fingers like this in front of reporters to make that point, that if they really wanted to change this in the most expeditious way possible, that they would do that through clarifying their enforcement and not through the legislative process. I think her words were, "We don't do anything around here, so how is this going to get done?"
And we know this issue is not going away anytime soon. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House Minority Leader, is traveling to the border to those sites on Monday, so sure to be in the spotlight still. Ben Siegel, thank you so much for that. Busy day here on Donald Trump's 72nd birthday, and we are glad you joined us here in the briefing room. For Rick Klein, I'm Devin Dwyer. We'll see you next time here on ABC News Live.